tuning in. I'm Coach Zach Sprinkle. And if you've noticed, I got a little different format. I'm switching it up. I will now be known as Coach Zach Sprinkle, even though I still have the Z-Static banner behind me, just waiting on the new banners in the mail. So with that in mind, we're gonna go ahead and begin the video. So today's video, we're gonna dive deep into something that I find very fascinating. And it's almost difficult to find this information. It just doesn't pop up. So you kind of have to start digging on some of this stuff. However, I'm going to be going over plant defense chemicals. And when I'm talking about this, I'm talking about the anti-nutrients, the tannins, the phytates, the lectins. But in particular, in today's video, we're going to be going over the most sinister of all these compounds, which are oxalates. So for starters, what are plant defense chemicals or anti-nutrients? Basically, plants are no different than every other living organism on the planet. One of their main objectives in life is to reach maturity and pass on their seed and perpetuate the species. So since plants are rooted down into the ground, they don't have claws, they can't bite, they can't run away, they over time have evolved to survive just as we have. And so they contain chemicals, and every plant contains some sort of defense chemical to keep predators from eating it, whether it's caterpillars, ladybugs, cows, humans, whatever. Every plant wants to survive, so it's going to do the best it can to defend itself. And so that's why all plants have some sort of chemical inside them so that they don't get completely eaten up and go extinct. When it comes to oxalate, every single plant out there contains oxalate in different degrees, but every single fruit, nut, seed, root, stem, leaf, grain, all contain some oxalates. Some are very low, some are very high. So it's pretty important to know which foods contain what amounts if you think that oxalates may be a problem for you, because you're probably getting much higher doses of oxalate than are recommended and that are even safe. It's just a lot of our superfoods, quote unquote, tend to be very high in oxalate and actually poisoning your body. And when people say, well, meat contains oxalate, well, meat contains a very, very trace amount of oxalate, not enough to be detrimental to your health, as well as we actually produce a little bit of oxalate every day in our liver as part of our natural metabolic process. What are oxalates? Oxalic acid is just a naturally occurring molecule in plants. However, it's very toxic and highly corrosive. As a matter of fact, it binds to minerals so well, you can go down to Home Depot and buy big containers of it as wood bleach and also rust remover. So once we consume the oxalic acid, since it's so good at binding to minerals, it binds to the minerals in our body, and then we have oxalate. Oxalates form in different structures in the body, and primarily they form very jagged crystal-like structures that resemble broken shards of glass, toothpicks, fiberglass, and our body does not have the ability to metabolize oxalate. So it has to figure out a way to manage the oxalate. And a good analogy is using asbestos. So we developed asbestos. It's a mineral. It's this amazing building material. It's indestructible. It doesn't burn. It doesn't rot. It insulates. It lasts forever. But the problem with asbestos is once the fibers are airborne and somebody inhales it, those asbestos fibers get embedded into the tissues of your lungs and they stay there forever because we cannot metabolize the asbestos. So the asbestos just sits in your lungs, and that's and irritating the lining of the lungs. And so that's exactly why you can have somebody who, you know, was exposed to asbestos as a kid playing around an old attic or something like that, and then all of a sudden they develop lung cancer when they're 50, 60 years old. As part of this management, our body can really only get rid of about 50 milligrams of oxalate per day. Now, the average person eats around 200 to 300, and that would be a guy eating the standard American diet. And then, so you take the average health nut that's eating the green smoothie in the morning with the almond milk, and they're snacking on almonds, and then they're having some quinoa or maybe some oats or some brown rice, and they're just eating vegetables throughout the whole day. A conservative estimate is probably around 800 milligrams. Now consider that and compare it against the 50 milligrams that our body is able to process. Well, that leaves quite a bit of oxalate floating around in the bloodstream. As an example, 1 ounce of almonds, which is a serving, and 4 ounces of cooked sweet potato, which is about a medium-sized sweet potato while cooked, contains 260 milligrams of oxalic acid. Now imagine all that oxalate floating around in your bloodstream, binding to your minerals, making shards of glass that can actually be sold at Home Depot as rust remover. That doesn't paint a very pretty picture. Now imagine doing that day in, day out for decades. You're starting to see how this can be a problem. So what happens to all the rest of the oxalates floating around in our bloodstream? Well, since our body can't get rid of them, it starts to store them. And where does it store them? It's anybody's guess. It's almost as unique as our fingerprints, and that's what makes testing for oxalates so difficult to test for. Urine tests aren't accurate, blood tests aren't accurate, tissue samples aren't accurate, bone samples aren't accurate. Even a CT scan will not detect calcium oxalate kidney stones until after they've started to form. And your body can store them in the muscles, it can store them in the skin, the joints, the thyroid, the kidneys, the brain, the eyeballs, you name it. It's anybody's guess where these things can be stored. Yes, again, earlier I said not a pretty picture. That picture is starting to get pretty damn ugly at this point. And because oxalates store in any part of the body, oxalate toxicity is usually misdiagnosed as other things. For example, I'm going to read this off because it's very important. I don't want to leave anything out here. So oxalates stored in the thyroid get misdiagnosed as Hashimoto's, as it can cause either hyper or hypothyroidism. Oxalates stored in the joints can be misdiagnosed as rheumatoid arthritis. Oxalates stored in the muscles can be misdiagnosed as fibromyalgia. Kidney damage, breast cancer, endometriosis, male infertility, leaky gut, gout, skin rashes, mental illness. Remember, they can lodge in the brain too. Anxiety, depression, cognitive function. Even people sometimes get symptoms of scratchy eyes. They say they feel like they have sand in their eyes. Remember, shards of glass that are depositing into the tissues of your eyes is not going to be any fun. And the symptoms go on and on and on and on. There's just too many to list. And yet, some people, like myself, I fell for all the, the smoothies and the superfoods and the health foods. I mean, I put pounds and pounds of that shit into my body for years. I don't think I ever really developed a reaction to oxalates. And some people, some people don't really seem to ever develop reactions. And some people react very violently to these. And there's a lot of horror stories out there about people spent years going in and out of the hospital, doctors being misdiagnosed before they finally started to basically go on a low oxalate diet and detox, their body from oxalates. And also, not to mention, we can bring up the asbestos analogy again. And just because you don't have any symptoms today doesn't mean you're not going to eventually develop symptoms, 10, 15 years down the road. Not that you will, but it's anybody's guess. And the bottom line is, if you have this knowledge, why would you still continue to put these things into your body? Keeping this in mind, imagine how frustrating it can be for somebody who is going to the doctor. They're getting all the tests. They're doing what they're supposed to be doing. They're getting the procedures, the medications. They cleaned up their diet. They quit eating meat. They're eating nothing but superfoods. So they're eating the almonds, eating the sweet potatoes. Or you see where I'm going with this? It's just a cycle, and they keep getting worse and worse and sicker, despite doing everything they're told to be healthy. And the things they're being told to be healthy are actually the very thing that's making them sick. So some people have some theories, which have all been proven to be complete BS, on how to deal with oxalates in our food. Because oxalates are nothing new. As a matter of fact, in about the mid-1800s, they started paying a lot of attention to oxalates in food. It was kind of a big deal. Like, oxalate toxicity was definitely something that was on all doctors' radar. However, something happened about the mid-1900s, and all of a sudden, Doctors searching for oxalate related issues just kind of went away, wasn't on the books. It was almost just kind of buried. You might hear someone say, well, if you eat high oxalate foods, all you have to do is drink plenty of water to flush it all out. Two reasons why that's bogus is, number one, we talked about your body can only process so many per day. That's a fact. The rest gets stored. And number two, if you're someone that is genuinely trying to take charge of your health and do the right thing, trust me, you've already been told many, many times to drink plenty of water. We're all drinking a lot of water. Why are we all still getting sick? All you have to do is take extra calcium and electrolytes and they'll bind up to the oxalate and it'll be a non-issue. Well, that's true. That can help kind of defend you against the mineral deficiency you may develop from high oxalate foods binding to your calcium and your electrolytes. However, it doesn't change the fact that you still have those oxalates in your body. You also might hear, my liver is just going to filter all that stuff out. Well, the liver is not a filter. It's more like a processing plant. Your liver takes the toxins and it modifies them however it feels it has to, and it does a very good job of that. And then it sends them on their way to be excreted and get rid of them out of the body. And let's also keep in mind that the liver actually produces oxalate as part of our natural biological process. So your liver isn't going to save you from making poor food choices when it comes to oxalate. Now, cooking, boiling, fermenting, all these methods can lower the amount of oxalate in your food. However, keep in mind, if you're eating 10 to 20 times the amount of oxalate per day that your body can handle, you are still getting too much. That is not solving the problem either. The only way to get rid of oxalates in your body is to go on a low oxalate diet. There's plenty of websites out there. You can download a lot of charts on low oxalate foods. And pretty much you're going to have to eliminate most nuts, seeds, vegetables, and grains from your diet because these are all the trouble foods when it comes to oxalates. There are some you can have. I'm not saying you can't have any of that stuff, but you want to look at these charts and know the amount of oxalate that is in the food you're eating. Also, we want to stop mega dosing vitamin C. We're told that the more vitamin C we have, the healthier our immune systems are going to be. And actually twofold, putting too many antioxidants in your body, supplementation-wise, suppresses your natural immune system. And then vitamin C that is not utilized in the body right away, what happens to the excess vitamin C? It converts. What does it convert into? Oxalic acid. So all that excess vitamin C you're taking, once it converts into oxalic acid, it's going to bind to your minerals and actually rob you of your health. And especially, let's take things even a little bit further. Let's say that you're a smoothie and a juicy junkie and you like to make these things 2 or 3 days in advance. Well, once you grind all that up, the vitamin C is already starting to break down, turning into oxalic acid, making the oxalic acid content of your smoothies even higher than it already is. And then to add on top of that, since oxalic acid is water soluble, all the water in the juicing we're doing and the smoothies we're drinking makes it more absorbable, which puts more into your body. So we have to stop the beet juice cleanses. Chances are if you take a 3-day beet juice cleansing detox, your body is more toxic than when you started. Remember, a toxin is a toxin, end of story. Does not matter if it comes from a quote-unquote superfood. Given this understanding of oxalates, we can start to see how if we adhere to just a plant-based diet to get our fat and our protein, all of our calories for the day, and our nutrients, there is no way we can eat an entirely plant-based diet without absolutely overloading our body with oxalate. That math just does not work. Now, I'm not here to tell anybody that they need to eliminate all plants from their diet like I have. However, a diet based on animal meat and organs and animal fat is absolutely critical for human health and then fill in the gaps with the least toxic plants you can find, primarily fruit. So the word sinister. We've already talked about how sneaky oxalates are and how they build up in the body and how they're very hard to detect. Another very sneaky thing about oxalates is once you decide to rid your body of oxalates, and let's say you're like, you know what, I'm going to get rid of these things, I'm going on a low oxalate diet. Well, it's just not that easy. Once you lower the oxalate in your diet, our body starts to go through what we call dumping. And what dumping is your body starts to recognize that we're not putting all these toxins, all these oxalates in our body, so it sees it safe to trigger a release of the stored oxalate. And so you're going to flood your body with these toxins, you're going to get symptoms back, you're going to be very uncomfortable. And the thing about this dumping process, this detox process from oxalates, can continue for up to 10 years. There's stories of people who have been on low oxalate diets now for 7-8 years, and they still, every now and then, they don't know really what triggers it, but all of a sudden their body will trigger a release, and all of a sudden their symptoms come back. They may get a skin rash, they may get itchy eyes, whatever the case may be. Like I said, these symptoms go on and on and on. They could be anything. So that's something to be aware of as well. So once you really want to go to a low oxalate diet, make sure you're paying attention to how you feel. And if you start to feel worse, you may want to just add a little bit of oxalates and slowly wean yourself off. So this idea we've been sold about to be healthy, we need to eat as many nuts and seeds and vegetables and fruits as we can, is just not true. Eating the rainbow may be making you pretty damn sick. I'm going to leave you guys with one last final thought here. If you are a person that has some sort of health issue that you just can't figure out, you've been to the doctors, you're doing everything you're supposed to be doing, maybe start digging a little bit into the oxalates. And there's a lot of information out there. There's a lot of people that have dedicated their lives to spreading the word of oxalates and how damaging they are to their health. There's a lot of people out there that were literally on their deathbed before they figured this out. So if you think you may be dealing with something like that, just Google around a bit, find some groups on Instagram, there's plenty of videos, just find some support, because whatever your story is, there's somebody out there that has the exact same story that has overcome that obstacle and returned themselves back to health. Whew, that was a lot of information, guys. I'm worn out after making this video, but I always try to bring you guys a positive message. So take charge of your health and subscribe to my channel. Questions and comments go below. I'm Coach Zach Sprinkle. See you next time.